In the gritty streets of 1980s New York, a city choking on corruption, fear, and ambition, one man rose to become the most recognizable face of organized crime in America. His name was John Gotti. For a time, he convinced the world and himself that he was untouchable. He wore $1,000 suits, spoke with absolute certainty, and carried himself like a king who believed the rules simply no longer applied to him. Newspapers followed his every move. Cameras waited outside courtrooms just to capture his confident smirk. Crowds gathered for a chance to see him walk by. Too many, he wasn't just a mob boss, he was the Mafia itself. But beneath the tailored image and the flashy headlines was a story driven by deep insecurity, obsession, and an ego that demanded constant praise. This wasn't just organized crime. It was a personal war against the world, and in the end, that war consumed him. To understand how John Gotti reached that point, you have to go back to where it all began. John Joseph Gotti Jr. was born on October 27, 1940. In the South Bronx, he was the fifth of 13 children in a family that lived under constant financial strain. His father worked irregular jobs and struggled with gambling, while his mother tried to maintain order in a household filled with noise, tension, and a sense of scarcity. From an early age, Gotti learned that stability was fragile and respect had to be taken, not given. Authority figures meant nothing to him, and school offered no sense of control or reward. By his early teens, he was already skipping classes, running errands for local bookmakers, and learning how money moved through fear and obligation. At 16, he dropped out of school completely and gravitated toward a street crew in Queens, known as the Fulton Rockaway Boys. They stole cars, intimidated shop owners, and made quick money wherever they could. It was a life that offered something Gotti had never had before, a sense of identity and belonging. His first arrests didn't scare him away, it just pulled him deeper into that world. By the early 1960s, Gotti had aligned himself with the Gambino crime family, one of New York's 5 families and one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. His early work was physical and risky, hijacking cargo, stealing high-value goods, and feeding profits up the chain of command. Prison followed, but incarceration didn't slow his rise. It educated him. Inside, Gotti learned how power really worked. He learned who mattered, who didn't, and how silence was enforced. When he returned to the streets, he came back under the protection of Aniello Neil Delacrosse, the Gambino underboss. Delacrosse was a feared figure who respected street loyalty over corporate caution. He became Gotti's mentor, shielding him and promoting him, recognizing that Gotti inspired a fierce devotion in others. When violence erupted in a Gambino-related dispute in the early 1970s, Gotti's role earned him prison time, but it also earned him respect within the family. When he was formally inducted in 1977, he was no longer just another soldier, someone people noticed. The Gambino family changed forever when its legendary leader, Carlo Gambino, died in 1976. Leadership passed not to the heir apparent Delacrosse, but to Paul Castellano. Castellano was a man who believed in insulation, legitimacy, and keeping a safe distance from street-level chaos, focused on white-collar crime, corporate fronts, and quiet control. Gotti represented the exact opposite philosophy. He was visible, he was emotional, he was unrestrained, and he grew increasingly frustrated by a leadership style that felt completely detached from the street culture he understood so well. For years, Delacrosse kept the peace between these two worlds, the old-school street guys and the new-school corporate mobsters, but when he died in December 1985, that balance vanished instantly. Gotti and his allies moved quickly, believing that waiting meant losing everything they had built. What followed was one of the most audacious power shifts in Mafia history. Castellano was removed in a highly public act that shocked New York and sent a clear message through the underworld. The old order was finished. John Gotti was now the boss of the Gambino family. And Gotti didn't hide from his new position. He embraced it. He held meetings and social clubs that became open secrets. He dressed like a celebrity and treated his legal battles like theatrical performances, and it worked. Charges collapsed. Witnesses recanted their testimony. Juries hesitated. Each courtroom victory reinforced his belief that he was smarter than the system trying to stop him. The media fed the myth. He became the Dapper Don, then the Teflon Don, celebrated for walking free, while others fell. He threw massive block parties, handed out cash to neighbors, and cultivated the image of a man protected by something more than just luck. But behind the flashy image, the machinery of the family expanded. Construction, unions, gambling, waste hauling, loan sharking entire industries moved at his discretion. Loyalty was rewarded generously, but it came with a heavy cost. Fear held everything together, and fear is never stable. As Gotti grew more confident, he grew more careless, spoke openly in places he believed were safe. He complained. He criticized his own people. He let his guard down. Federal investigators weren't just chasing headlines anymore. They were listening, quietly, patiently, and they were recording everything. They captured conversations Gotti never imagined would be heard outside his inner circle. But the most dangerous mistake came from within. His underboss Sammy, the Bull Gravano, had been fiercely loyal and deeply involved in the family's most brutal operations. But when survival was on the line, loyalty became conditional. Faced with overwhelming evidence and the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison, Gravano did the unthinkable. He cooperated with prosecutors. He turned on his boss. When Gravano's testimony and the secret recordings were played in court, the legend of John Gotti collapsed. The jury heard Gotti in his own words: arrogant, ruthless, and undeniably guilty. There was no ambiguity left. In 1992, he was convicted on all major charges and sentenced to life without parole. The man who once ruled New York left the courtroom in handcuffs, shouting defiance to a system that no longer feared him. Prison stripped Gotti of everything that defined him: his influence, his visibility, his control. The applause he craved was replaced by the silence of isolation. Illness followed. When he died in 2002, the world he symbolized had already disappeared. The Mafia didn't vanish, but it retreated back into the shadows. Public bosses became liabilities. Ego became evidence. And silence, once again, became the key to survival. So what does this story show us about human behavior? It shows us how power can completely reshape perception. Gotti didn't fall because he lacked intelligence. He fell because his own success convinced him that past victories guaranteed future immunity. Psychologists call this overconfidence bias, the belief that the rules apply to everyone else, but not to you. Gotti's entire identity depended on being seen, admired, and feared. That very need for visibility is what made him vulnerable. The loyalty he assumed was permanent collapsed the moment fear of prison outweighed devotion to him. The powerful image he built demanded constant reinforcement, and that constant demand for recognition is what destroyed the very structure that supported him. In the end, John Gotti wasn't just defeated by his rivals or by prosecutors. He was undone by his own desperate need to be recognized as untouchable. And, as his story proves, no one ever is. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, be sure to subscribe for more deep dives into history and human nature.